Oh my God. Did the Duke of York just say he has an alibi at Pizza Express in Woking? Did he just mention that he has a medical condition where he doesn't swear? Did he just talk about being aroused in a kind of princely way? Did he just say he doesn't regret being friends with someone who's a convicted paedophile? What?
Hello and welcome to Crisis What Crisis, the podcast that shows you how to navigate life's toughest moments. I'm Andy Coulson and my guest today is Sam Mcalister. For over a decade at BBC Newsnight, Sam secured interviews that others just couldn't. President Bill Clinton, Elon Musk, Stormy Daniels and many, many others. But it was one conversation in 2019 that would ultimately change the course of Sam's life. After 6 months of negotiation, she convinced Prince Andrew to be interviewed by Emily Maitlis. And in that interview, he discussed his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. The interview became a global news event and it resulted, of course, in Andrew stepping back from royal duties. It was one of the most significant moments in modern British journalism and, of course, we know what followed.
It is not relevant, that you went to speak to him in person. It is not relevant whether or not you were in a Pizza Express in Woking. It really doesn't feel relevant to a normal person whether you were sweating or not when you're accused of raping someone. These are all red herrings, and every red herring became more and more kind of like suffocating in terms of being in the room listening to those off-key, off-kilter, bad answers.
Yet Sam's central role in this piece of history was underplayed, the invisible work, largely, of a producer. Not long after Sam left the BBC to take a gamble and write a book, and it paid off. Her brilliant memoir, Scoops, became a bestseller and a Netflix film.
You walk away from a job thinking you might end up in penury. Could it be a terrible mistake? Should you have taken that job with Piers Morgan? And now here you are with 130 people on payroll, Billie Piper dressed in your, kind of cheap as chips outfit, strutting, pretending to be you in a blonde wig and huge sunglasses that you used to wear every day at the office and people used to take the mickey out of you for. And wow. I mean, if you're not going to cry at that, you must have a heart of stone.
And today Sam, who before the BBC worked as a criminal barrister, is a visiting senior fellow teaching negotiation at the London School of Economics and is a sought-after keynote speaker. What fascinates me, among other things, is just how Sam built something so many people struggle with, the ability to make powerful people trust her, like her, and respect her enough to say yes when they said no to everyone else. Sam is a master not of manipulation but of trust building, and she is now one of Britain's most compelling storytellers on the subjects of persuasion, power and resilience. Sam Mcalister, welcome to Crisis What Crisis, and how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for the very nice introduction.
Well, it's great to have you with us, Sam. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with that sort of moment of risk that I touched on in that intro there, of what I suppose was professional crisis. July 2021, you took voluntary redundancy from the BBC after 17 years. You're a single mother. You're in the middle of the pandemic. You're suffering, I think, actually from a pretty serious bout of COVID. And you decided to give it all up, that pension, that security, that steady income to write your book. You threw the dice, as you put it. Just sort of take me to that moment. Take me to the decision making and what led to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never want to sound like a sort of bitter ex-girlfriend when it comes to the BBC. It was obviously a corporation I loved. I loved working there. I had some amazing opportunities and some amazing colleagues. So just to preface it by saying I don't want to just kind of, slag off what was an incredible professional and personal journey with extraordinary people and amazing experiences. However, I wasn't really quite as associated with the work that I'd done on this interview as I wanted to be. And so you really have a decision to make. The decision you make as someone like myself who's a pragmatist and who doesn't like to whine or bitch or be difficult is you suck it up and you move on, or you do something. So those to me were the decisions that I needed to make. Am I going to just go, do you know what, this is just how the media works. I am just a junior producer. It's not that big a deal not to have my name attached to it that much. I know what I did. It's fine. Or will I say, actually, this does matter to me, and so I'm going to take proactive steps to do something about it. So clearly I chose the latter. And I decided I wanted to write a book. I didn't think particularly anyone would want to read it other than my mum. She kindly bought 10 copies. Thanks, Mum. But it was really just more, I just wanted to put my name on it, not in a bitter way, just in a sort of, this was a big deal. And
Yeah.
I just wanted people to know that I had been part of it, even if it was just 10 people. So I went to the Beeb and I kind of felt out the proposition of writing a book and kind of like talking about the interviews I'd worked on over the years. And it became apparent quite quickly that that probably was not going to be an option that was compatible with me continuing working there. So now I have a new decision. And am I going to throw the dice? So I'm a nobody with no book agent, with no book deal, with no book proposal, and a single income. It's a big risk. But if I don't take that risk, if I don't try and find a book agent, a book deal, write a book, take the risk, will I always regret it? I thought I would.
Hmm.
So lucky to get a book agent, lucky to get a book deal, lucky to get voluntary redundancy, and super lucky to get a little bit of cash from the publishers. And so I leapt.
What about the anxiety though of the idea of it not working out? And as you say, on balance, there wasn't clear evidence that it was going to go the way it went. How did you manage that sort of that decision making? What was the sort of balance in your mind of risk versus reward, and how did you kind of get to the point of taking the plunge?
Yeah, so I had a very pragmatic view on it. And my poor mum, who used to listen to me pontificate about taking this risk, I talked about ducks in a row. And if my mum Netta had a quid for every time I said that phrase, she would be worth more than Elon Musk. But I had literally in notes on my iPhone, other phones are available, of course, a list of three outcomes. Outcome one being an optimistic one, a mid one, and then a depressing one where it all went wrong. And, the optimistic outcome was I get the book deal, I get the voluntary redundancy, because that was actually not certain.
Hmm.
Ironically, I was deemed business essential. So I couldn't get voluntary redundancy when everyone else was walking away with huge, huge settlements. And I didn't walk away with a huge settlement, but if I got that, that was life-changing money for me.
Right.
And then it was like, getting a speaking agent, getting a bit of speaking income. What did like an optimistic outcome look like?
Mm.
And then I had what does a pessimistic outcome look like? And to be brutally honest, what it looked like was I could survive for 2 years without taking up a traditional media role again. If I got to the end of that 2 years and this had not panned out, at least I'd given it a shot. And if it did pan out, then I had no clue what the future would really look like other than book deal, possibly more speaking, and other options TBC. So there was a lot of volatility,
Mm.
but I knew I had enough income to survive for 2 years, me and my son keeping the lights on, keeping my son fed, not living a bougie lifestyle, no holidays, no cars. That's not my lifestyle at all. And I thought, well, that's okay. We're not going to be in penury, but it was still a big risk, particularly with a single income.
Yeah. Um, let's go back a bit, Sam, because I think to understand how you're able to make the decision in that moment, I think there are clues in earlier in your life, because it's certainly not the first time that you rolled the dice professionally. But let's just go a little bit further back, because I'm interested to understand kind of how that decision making, or how you were able to get to the point of making that decision. What kind of came before? You've said before that that colleagues at the BBC had remarked that you weren't very BBC. Tell us a bit about your childhood then, and the path actually that led you first to law. Just give us a flavour of what came before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably not very BBC. I don't know whether it was meant as an insult or a compliment. Is it neutral? I'm not sure. Probably an
Well, there's a
insult.
debate to be had these days whether or not it's necessarily seen as a
Nowadays,
negative.
it's a
Yeah,
compliment. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I think just really that my background was very different to lots of my colleagues. And look, I'm not saying I grew up on a council estate and I was living in poverty, but my parents left school at 14. My mum had been brought up on a council estate, East End market people. My dad was kind of like a, lower middle class guy. He left school at 14 too. He was a serial entrepreneur. And so I grew up with two parents who actually were not working. by the time I was born, but they had worked, my dad for 30 something years before I was born, and my mum since she was 14 as well. So by the time I arrived, they basically sold their business.
Right.
And we then became, instead of, market people, suddenly my mum and dad are living in Guernsey in the Isle of Man, sort of like, with a BMW and this sort of bougie, weird island lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I had this wonderful mix in the sense of the privilege of financial security from the hard work my parents had done, but with that really kind of like pervasive understanding that money comes and goes. They had been in poverty. They understood, and my mum's still with us, thank God. They understood what that was. So I had a very healthy upbringing and relationship with money in the
Yeah.
sense that they would tell me, you need to like yourself and get education because money comes and goes.
With
So
money, but also with work, right?
100%.
The work
Yeah,
ethic was very
that's
alive
it.
in
The
your
work
upbringing.
ethic,
Yeah.
exactly. And ironically, for parents who didn't work, they had such a hugely strong work ethic, and that was put into me very early. And if there was an emergency, of course they would support me. But it was clear to me that I wanted to be financially independent as soon as I could be, given, that I'd been a burden on them as any child is on their parents, as we both know, because we have kids.
Yes, indeed.
So at university, to get to university was such an achievement, first in my family. So already I feel like queen of the world. And I think that's really the key to my resilience and happiness
Mm.
is that things that other people take for granted, going to university, getting their first bit of income, like having the privilege of a university education, to me, they were a really big deal. So I already felt like an absolute winner in just the education that I achieved.
Yeah.
And then I'm at university. I'm doing debating and all this kind of stuff. I love an argument, love public speaking. And at the end of that period, I did not know what to do with my life. And I'd watched all these law programs. I'd never met a lawyer, but I'd seen a lot of them on the telly and it looked quite fun. Ally McBeal, great outfits, great dating, a bit of intellect along the way. It was really fun. And I just kind of thought, well, that seems like an interesting thing. But I didn't realize you could do it postgraduate. And one of the other kids on the course, he was doing postgraduate law where you do 3 years and 9 months.
Hmm.
He mentioned this to me. I thought, oh, that sounds great. I didn't realize I messed up and did an English degree. I could still be a lawyer. And he's like, well, I don't think people like you would get on the course. And that is not a red rag to a bull. It doesn't make me want to do it more, but I'm like, I disagree. Let's give it a shot. So I applied the next day and I got on that course and I did become a barrister, which I felt was a massive achievement. And I practiced only for 2 years, but it was a dream come true to have the opportunity to have gone from my grandma working on the market, who left school at 13, my mum super clever, but had to leave school to get a job,
Mm.
to me, like practicing in a court of law.
Yeah.
So the social mobility and the achievement that was personal was so huge to me in comparison to the kids around me. And that foundation of confidence and pride, I suppose,
Yeah.
makes me as resilient and happy as I am, despite the difficulties that sometimes I face professionally and personally.
Yeah. And so the role as a barrister, a stunning achievement, as you say, but over time became very stressful, and
100%.
and professionally very difficult for you. Just talk us through that. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I hated it. I hated it with a visceral passion. It was just not the right fit. But I was thrilled to have tried it. I did it for 2 years. It's a massive privilege to hold someone's liberty in your hands. People are in their darkest moments of crisis and they're stuck with some 25-year-old,
And
in a prison
you're a
cell.
defence barrister dealing with people who are absolutely plunged into their lives are unravelling.
Exactly, exactly. I know you understand, right? And to be in the privileged position of having someone's future, their liberty, their life, their family, everything in your hands. It's an incredible responsibility and it's a very burdensome one when you're 25 years old and you take it very seriously and you're a fish out of water in the company that you're keeping.
Mm.
So the combination really of the burden, and I don't want to sound like a big narcissist, but you're only 25, 26, it's a very big burden on
Mm.
someone like me who takes it so seriously. So I got to the stage where, despite my love for the clients, I loved being with clients, despite my love for the clients, and I had a good stream of work, my hair was falling out. I had insomnia. I was having, I suppose, what we would now call panic attacks, but I didn't know what they were, but I just had this constant sort of feeling of anxiety. And I knew that couldn't continue because I can't do that for 40 years.
Mm.
I'm gonna drop dead. I mean, it felt like some kind of impossible thing to continue. So
What was the root of the anxiety, Sam? I mean, obviously it's a job that you were, in a way you loved, but you were also struggling with. So what was the struggle?
the struggle was not being able to do a good job. I'd put it this way. It's a bit like someone starts medical school and on day one they're asked to perform neurosurgery.
Mm.
I felt that the space between what we had been taught
Mm.
and then we're on our feet, even in a magistrate's court, and it's quite a simple crime, that is someone's criminal record. Like it's a responsibility they bear for life if you mess up.
Mm.
And so the thing I found hard, one of my colleagues said I took it too seriously. And he had a point, but I couldn't dissociate myself from how serious I felt the job was. So I was working 7 days a week. There wasn't much money coming in. I was basically, up every night, every morning. I was anxious about what the case was going to be because you often only got it a couple of hours before. And you might have someone's entire life in your hands with 30 minutes of prep. I could not live with that. And that made me ineffective for the job. It made me passionate about it, sure, but it meant I wasn't the right match because I couldn't live with a glib treatment of something so serious. And I was ill-equipped, being so young and with so little experience to take on the incredible responsibility and burden. And it started to break me. So I had to walk away.
Brave decision though. Can't have been straightforward. I mean,
Yeah,
we've talked about the decision that came later. Here's another much earlier in your life. You're 25 years old, just getting
yeah.
started in life, and you're self-aware enough. Obviously, it's manifesting in a pretty visceral way. Clearly, something had to change. But to say no, this is it. I'm gonna change direction completely. Quite brave.
Yeah, I have a certain fearlessness or foolhardiness. I mean, it's a side of a same coin, right? One side
Yeah.
is kind of brave and the other side is foolish. I had no plan. It wasn't like the later decision where I had a really good plan,
Mm.
when I was like 40 something.
Mm.
This was a young woman with zero plan and zero source of income. I just knew I couldn't go another day. I literally, within 24 hours, I walked out. And so it was hard to begin with. I was sitting on my sofa just thinking, well, geez, like what now? And there was no what now. I had nothing in place. So I was just kind of like, struggling around, looking for income. Some friends were doing some teaching and public speaking. I ended up in some training session in Croydon. And then I was randomly in schools teaching kids who really didn't want to be there how to do public speaking. And then at the end of that, I did some work experience with a friend at the BBC, which led to everything that followed. But that was probably like a year in.
Right.
So there was a year of quite hand to mouthy and everyone saying what, not my parents, to be clear, who was 100% supportive. Happiness was the only thing that they were looking for me. They
Mm.
didn't want me to be unhappy. But everyone else, what have you done? It's so high status, wasting that education, all of that. So you have to really drown that chatter out and just concentrate on getting enough income to keep the lights on and then trying to work out what the hell are you going to do with the rest of your life.
So this opportunity comes to the BBC. Was
Yes.
that a sort of switch that flipped on? I mean, or was that a slow build towards? Hang on a second. I know exactly what I can do here. I know exactly what my role could be here. Or did you just sort of fall in love with it?
A bit of both, to be honest. I mean, to be brutally honest, when I first started working, I worked on Law and Action, an amazing program on Radio 4, and I just did 2 days work experience. But I treat any work experience or interaction with any corporation like it's a job interview. So I kind of like, was on very good behavior for 48 hours, and none of them were lawyers. But what they were an incredibly intellectually like adept, clever, interesting, agile, thoughtful group of people. And having gone from this very high octane environment where lives were on the line to be somewhere where, you might have a 15-minute conversation about the role of the Supreme Court or a House of Lords judgment or a meeting, kind of like pontificating about the future of, kind of legislation in the house, in housing or something. It felt like, oh my gosh, what a relief. And it felt like the kind of place where I could learn and grow. So I enjoyed the lack of fear and the lack of terror. And, my mum always says no babies are dead. I mean, in broadcasting, I never really took it as seriously as some of my colleagues. As long as you're not getting sued, really, we're not curing cancer. We're not kind of like splitting the atom. No babies are dead. So I just really enjoyed the process of learning stuff about places I didn't know anything about because my education was not as, kind of posh as lots of the people I was working with. And I just really loved the vibe. And so, I just tried to stay, and 6 weeks became 6 months, and so it continued. But it was just a feeling of peace that I hadn't had after all that chaos. And that was the feeling I was chasing.
Yeah. And you recognize what you could bring to it all, right?
Yes.
You understood in those rooms that you found yourself in with, I suspect a fair few egos. Let's put it more
Yes.
kindly, people with an awful lot of experience.
Yes.
You worked out, hang on, I can be properly useful here. Was there
Yeah.
also a bit of kind of imposter syndrome at that stage as well? Were you also trying to convince yourself, I can do this, I'm capable of this? Were there doubts?
No, I've got to be honest. No, I remember a colleague saying to me, it's the first time I'd heard of imposter syndrome. And I hope you'll forgive me because I know it's a massive industry, but I think it's mostly a crock.
Yeah.
And I remember her saying to me, "Oh, you must feel like, an imposter, but don't feel like an imposter. You're here on merit. You deserve to be here." And I was like, "Yeah, babe, I know." Like, I think that's the antithesis of imposter syndrome. When you have got somewhere on merit
Yeah.
and you've worked your butt off and you know the price of an education or the opportunity to sit in a room with people pontificating about the future of the Middle East. I took it all with kind of like a pinch of salt. I don't take myself seriously. Despite appearances, I do not have an ego at all. I have a lot of confidence. So I never saw myself as an imposter. Sure, I didn't have any journalistic training. Sure, I'd not been formally taught, but I'm a quick learner. I had to learn how to edit and record.
Hmm.
I didn't think that learning these things put me at a huge disadvantage from the people around me. I was a bit rubbish at it to begin with, but I was learning and I was getting there. And my pay and my kind of like juniority reflected my lack of experience on that front. I was willing to put in the time to learn, but I never felt like an imposter. And I think that it's an unhelpful description for most people because it creates an extra layer of distance from the question, which is, am I here on merit? Did I work hard? And I could answer yes to both those questions. So I felt I was less experienced, but I never felt that I didn't deserve to be there.
Oh, I like that. It is, where's the positivity, I suppose, and certainly not in your case, but where is the positivity in sort of the discussion around imposter syndrome? Is it something that should be looked at and talked about in a different way?
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not a fan, I have to be
yeah,
honest. And
yeah.
I was actually thinking about writing a book about it as my next book. I just, when you find out how it started, it was two female psychologists, and they had a lot of women, particularly coming in, kind of like presenting with this, I don't think I deserve to have this job. Now, had
Mm,
they come to me as an unqualified non-psychologist, I would have said, listen, mate, like you've worked your nads off. You deserve to be there. Come on, put yourself together and go out there and, chase your dream. But instead, this massive industry and this massive psychological barrier has been created where everyone, understandably, who's feeling insecure or worried about their position, which most people do some of the time, have now got this kind of, smorgasbord of conversation around being an imposter. And I think most of the time it's either a little bit fake because they know they're really good, but they want to sound that they kind of have humility,
there's a bit of
right?
that. Yeah,
Bit of that. No, and I'm an imposter. No,
yeah.
I've done this for 30 years and I know I'm brilliant, but no, no. I know I'm an imposter too. Or
Humble imposter syndrome. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Or it's actually damaging because instead of people going, actually, do you know what? We're not being like a dick about it, but I work hard and I try to be good, and
yeah.
that should be good enough.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Well,
that should be good enough.
if we get the conversation right early enough around confidence and around resilience, we should be able to do away with imposter syndrome, shouldn't we?
No, I'm
That
ambitious about that. 2026, that's I'll be trying to do away with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, nice, good mission, good mission. Okay, let's go to 2019. The interview with Prince Andrew, as he was then, came in November, but after 6 months of negotiation between you and his representatives. Just tell us, Sam, about that process. Just give us the sort of the steps that you were feeling as you moved quite slowly towards that massive moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, from working in news, stories are important and unimportant. It moves with the wind. So the first stage actually was 13 months prior to the interview with an email from a PR that I'd done some work with, whose name I've never put in the public domain, because integrity and trust, as you were saying earlier on, that's actually the skill set, building trust and showing integrity towards people where possible.
Yeah.
But it all started with, yeah, just like an email inviting us to have a conversation with Prince Andrew. And that was turned down very quickly by me because it was an offering of a puff piece, where you go and meet him and he says he's incredible and amazing and he talks about his charitable work. And then the second of which you go, oh, yes, by the way, what about your friendship with the convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein? It's off with your head and you're pushed out of the door. So we declined in October, and most of my team didn't even know that I was talking to the palace. And then
And that was
I just kept
a
in touch.
Newsnight offer that was
Yeah,
being put to you. Well,
yeah.
that PR obviously fundamentally misunderstood what Newsnight is.
Well, God bless that PR. Well, the PR had worked with me before, right?
Yeah,
So she knew I was a good girl, as they
yeah,
might say in the trade. And so we'd never had an interview with a member of the royal family,
yeah,
and we never will again on Newsnight.
yeah.
But it was, in a sense, a gesture of generosity because it was a new client. It was exploratory. It wasn't 100%, this can definitely happen, but it was, a sort of like a firm offer. So it was turned down. And at that stage, he was kind of a forgotten prince, and being a forgotten prince would have been a good place to stay for him. But things change, So you go from being sort of, your team are like, we don't want this guy on, he's boring, we're not interested. And then the story moves. And so you find yourself increasingly in a situation where you have the possibility of something, or you had, and now the story's moved. Epstein's arrested, he's indicted, he's going to be incarcerated. So in the May of the next year, unbelievably, because I thought that would be the end of things, I get invited to Buckingham Palace. And that's the first time I've had any contact with Amanda Thirsk, who was his chief of staff, played by Keely Hawes in my movie. Sorry, had to be done. And that was the moment that I went to the palace for the first time. And I didn't even tell my boss for three reasons. Reason one, he's not going to agree to the conditions that we would have, which is that there will be no conditions. He's going to talk about his friendship with a paedophile. That ain't going to happen. Two, at that stage, Newsnight was in crisis. It had been because of the Savile situation, and we'd had 3 or 4 editors. There was a new editor coming. I'd had 3 deputy editors that year. I was dealing with lots of different people. And the third reason was that 99% of my job was rejection. So it was very unlikely he would say yes. So why give the false impression to your boss that you might get, this interview with a member of the royal family when you're pretty certain it ain't going to happen. So I just kind of went on my own. And that was the first time I met Amanda. And over the next 6 months, that relationship and that foundation and that honest conversation that we had on that first day as strangers, who then became, I would dare to say, friends, by the end of things. Although obviously when things went so awry, that friendship was hard to sustain. But I think we would have called each other friends for sure. That relationship was what propelled us from a position of a place that had no chance of having an interview with a member of the royal family talking about allegations of rape against him, which of course he denies, to being the place in which that interview occurred. It would have seemed impossible.
Tell us about how you built that trust, because of course it's easy now from this distance to say he should never have considered it, he should never have done it, he should never have gone anywhere near it, right? Which is the sort of popular view of that moment from his perspective. But actually, the issue is not that he necessarily should have done it. It's what he said when he did it. He could actually have used it, which I'm sure was the basis of your argument to him. He could have used it in a completely different way. Now, whether or not he was capable of doing that, I think we're all reasonably clear that he wasn't. But your argument was what, in a nutshell?
Exactly that, Andy. You've put your finger on it. The argument, in a sense, was just a completely honest one. You had an amazing life. At the moment, your life is kind of on hold because of this relationship with this guy Epstein. The country doesn't believe you. They've not seen the white of your eyes. They haven't seen the cut of your jib. They haven't heard from you. You've sent out this tiny statement, and it's always written up at the end of 8,000 words about Virginia Roberts, who made the accusations. There's nothing out there that is going to convince anyone that you didn't do it. And you want the lifestyle you used to have. You want to be able to walk your daughter down the aisle. He was 59. He wanted a birthday party. He wasn't a complete pariah, but he was certainly a bit of persona non grata. So it was the two elements. Element one is the personal. If he does an interview like this, will it basically clear his name? I was neutral on that. I don't know. How good are the answers going to be? That's a matter for him.
Mm-hmm.
But what we could offer was a fair opportunity to be given a platform for as long as he wanted. It was a very long interview, to talk about everything, nothing off the table, no conditions. And crucially, with a woman, and not only a woman, but one of the most impressive presenters in the country, Emily Maitlis, who, if people saw him speaking to her, they would know this was not some stitch-up interview. They would know that this was like a proper, hard questions asked interview. So the offer was, people don't believe you, they think you're guilty of sin. Here's an opportunity for you to persuade them otherwise. Are you going to do well with that? That's not our responsibility. That's on you. But this is a profound way to communicate with the nation about these allegations and possibly, change your situation to a more positive situation. That's basically the offering.
Yeah. We talk about this a lot on the pod with various guests that we've had some have decided to go public, some have decided to kind of, handle it the way they wanted to, they wanted to handle it by sort of staying quiet. When you reflect back on the interview now, where do you sort of land on it in terms of his decision making? What do you? The criticism, obviously, or the analysis is, he just made a total pig's ear of it. Was it a missed opportunity for him? Could he have used that interview in a different way? Could he have changed the course of what's come subsequently? Is there, or was he always on, not because of you guys, right? But was he always on a hiding to nothing with it?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to be exposed to that level of risk for 50 minutes as he was and not, mess up a bit. But my expectation, coming to it neutrally, was that he would just be really boring. And boring would have been a really good result here. If he had come in, been extremely boring, basically apologized without kind of showing liability, been circumspect, been kind of like reflective, been, somber. If he had done a boring interview explaining how he refuted the allegations and he was terribly sad about this awful man and his association with him, and he regretted that, I think it could have been neutral or positive for him.
Yeah, it was the absence of empathy, wasn't it?
Correct. The absence of empathy, and even the absence of fake empathy, to at least pretend that you care, or at least pretend to say sorry, or at least have some words that give the impression that you have any understanding that this isn't really about you. It's about this awful network of, oppression and, kind of like terrible behavior towards young women, particularly, Virginia Roberts, who sadly is no longer with us. To not show a glimpse of that was really the most fatal part. And then obviously some of the answers appeared far-fetched to add to that. So the lack of empathy, the lack of contrition, the lack of somberness, the lack of self-reflection, those were the fatal elements in my view. It could have gone the other way, but knowing perhaps a little bit more about him than I do now, I think it was unlikely to have gone the right way.
Yeah. And if we just sort of look at it purely from a sort of comms crisis management sort of, 'cause it's become such a case study for all the wrong reasons.
Yes.
It struck me also that he really prepared for it, but in all the wrong ways.
Exactly.
Some of the answers he gave, you just knew had been practiced, had been rehearsed, and were just in entirely the wrong answers to the wrong questions, if you know what I mean. You just put all his prep in the wrong direction,
You're totally correct.
which was
Every
revealing.
answer. Totally agree with you. Every answer was, it's not having kind of like an understanding of how the world works. You're so dissociated. It's not just Prince Andrew, it's lots of powerful people, surrounded by people telling them they're amazing. And they come up with ideas in a very small world that seem profoundly brilliant, like saying it was the honorable thing to do, to go and end the friendship with, a convicted sex offender, and that's gonna cut the mustard with a normal person, or indeed with me. And it kind of reminded me, I had a client one time that was accused of shoplifting, and he was doing really well on the stand. And they were like, so, did you go in with the intention to kind of like steal these trainers? And he went, I absolutely did not, blah, blah, blah. And it was, it was going all well, and they didn't have CCTV. And we kind of got to the last question, and I said, is there anything else you wanted to say or something? I basically screwed it up myself. And he was like, yes, absolutely. I did not go in the intention with stealing trainers. I went in with the intention of stealing a backpack. And and you're like, oh. And it was a bit like that. It's like, it is not relevant, that you went to speak to him in person. It is not relevant whether or not you were in a Pizza Express in Woking. It really doesn't feel relevant to a normal person whether you were sweating or not when you're accused of raping someone. Exactly. These are all red herrings, and every red herring became more and more kind of like suffocating in terms of being in the room listening to those off-key, off-kilter, bad answers.
You were clear in the moment that this was going to become what it became? I mean, and you never can be completely, can you? Obviously, but your instincts were this is deeply significant, and this is going to be a very significant moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by then, I have what I would call a news brain. I mean, I wasn't in the room with the highest level of knowledge about, the undersecretary of the department and what they did in 1864, which many of my colleagues would be. I didn't have that kind of classic, sort of education. But what I did have was an understanding of what the country thinks and feels, because I am like the country. I appreciate I'm a bit bougie now, but I am just an ordinary girl in an extraordinary situation. And I know what ordinary people, which I am, because I grew up on the Mail and the Sun and the Express, I grew up in that world. I know sitting there, oh my God, did the Duke of York just say he has an alibi at Pizza Express in Woking? Did he just mention that he has a medical condition where he doesn't swear? Did he just talk about being aroused in a kind of princely way? Did he just say he doesn't regret being friends with someone who's a convicted paedophile? What? So my non-cultured, non-BBC, non-posh brain is on fire. And my ex-barrister brain is also on fire because he said nothing to help himself other than one sentence where he said, I'd had that medical condition at the time.
What was your reaction to the reaction, if you like? I mean, you knew this was big, as you've just explained, but it exploded, obviously.
Yeah. I couldn't, I mean, even if I was the most sort of clever mystic Meg in the world, I could never have envisaged the impact that it has had, and the fact that here we are 6 years later still talking about it. And the conversation is not even over. The conversation is still ongoing because of the Epstein files and because of, President Trump. And, it's just in the press virtually every day. So I think the thing that was, shocking in a sense was the profound reach of this conversation. And of course, it was intergenerational, because you might be watching Ant and Dec the next day, as I was, and I'm a Celebrity, mentioning it. You might see a meme about, Pizza Express and sweatiness, or you might have watched the whole interview and kind of analysed it and been shocked by it in its kind of full extent. So it touched much more than Newsnight usually touches. It was the only conversation the country was having.
It really was. And as you say, to a large extent, continues to be. And that's the other thing that was achieved with the interview, which is inadvertent, I'm sure. But it managed to take. It was obviously a big story with an awful lot of interest, but the approach that he took meant that it as you just described, it kind of became part of the fabric of the country across all areas, all
Yeah,
ages, all groups, all demographics. Everybody was talking about it.
totally. He kind of democratized it with his answers
Yeah,
in a sense that, something that could have been a boring thing for kind of, an elite group of people who take an interest in such matters
yeah,
became the only conversation in town. I
yeah,
mean, my son's friends knew about Pizza Express in Woking. I mean, they probably didn't even know Prince Andrew was, but
yeah,
they'd seen a meme or something.
yeah.
So it was the only time in my career that I ever experienced that, and it was not something the BBC was used to, of course. So it had that extra tension of the slight embarrassment almost that the BBC often feels when it has success.
Yes, nicely put. Let's talk about how the BBC's handling of it then, and you've been um, generous, I would say, in the way that you've characterised the way that the BBC failed to give you sufficient credit. Certainly, in my opinion. But you did feel it. You did. That was what led in part to your decision making. We discussed right at the start of the conversation. How did that feel? I mean, was it a kind of immediate feeling that, hang on a second, I'm the person who brought this interview in. I've been a significant part of this, and I'm not getting sufficient credit for it. Was that an immediate feeling, or did that build over time, Sam?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not sure I ever really felt that way, to be honest. I just felt that that is how it works. It's very clear when you work in production. This is nothing against any presenter or any individual.
Mm, mm,
It just is the case that you do some work and then a presenter's name is on it, or whoever does the on-screen thing, their name is on it, and that was just kind of accepted as how it worked. I'd pushed against that a little bit over the years because when, for example, I worked on an interview and then Jeremy or Emily or Kirsty Walker, whoever it was, did it sufficiently well that there were, 6 pages in the mail slagging it off, which was like, yes, result. I was proud of that. I would cut out all those cuttings. That was part of my work. It
mm,
was like amazing to see it travel. So I'd spent some years putting my name on my work in a not in a passive aggressive way, just in an aggressive way
mm,
to my 6 followers on Twitter, as it was called, or LinkedIn, my 7 followers. I just always tried to attach my name to my work because I knew that I existed outside the BBC at some stage and I needed to be able to show the body of work I'd done. And some of this stuff was really high profile. So I think that rubbed people up the wrong way sometimes, but I didn't really care because I felt it was important to put my name to the work. So, in a sense, my frustration didn't come from the BBC and the way it behaved.
mm,
I'm not some victim in this. This is not a big deal in the scheme of things that happen to real people with real problems in the
mm,
real world. But in my little professional world, what I had established that if something cool happened that I had worked on, I liked people to know about it because that's the kind of brash gal I am. This was the biggest example in the history of journalism in my lifetime of something that the BBC had done. And not only that, it had been done with clean hands. This was not a Martin Bashir,
yeah.
Princess Diana situation. I knew how I'd behaved and I knew my integrity. And yeah, is that an arrogance? Is that,
No, it's
you know,
confidence.
it's a confidence. Yeah. I wanted my name on it. So it wasn't a kind of like, damn you, the BBC, damn you, Newsnight vibe. It was more a, okay, how do I have my name on this? And I realized that within an organization that has a million things to do and doesn't have time to worry about, the confidence of a junior producer, the only person that was going to do that was me.
I love that,
So
Sam. I love that.
I had to work out how to do it.
I love that, Sam, because it's interesting because I've misinterpreted it, right? Because I've looked at it and kind of got angry on your behalf.
Yeah, I'm not
and
angry.
you're actually, what you did is not get bitter, not get
No,
angry. You just took control.
no. Correct. And I wasn't even looking to get even. I mean, someone said this is like the best accidental revenge ever, because I got a Netflix deal and now, I was played by Billie Piper in an Emmy-nominated Netflix movie that was watched by 30 million people. It is, an
Not a bad
accidental,
sentence, that, Sam.
not a bad sentence, right? But there was no element of revenge in this. There is no bitterness. There is no issue. There is no kind of like, I've got no beef, as the kids say.
Yeah.
I have no beef, but I do have a very strong relationship with myself. And I
Mm.
knew that I wanted my name on this, and I had to find a way to do that without peeing off too many people, which I'm not sure I've succeeded in. But I wasn't looking to stir things up. I wasn't looking to be obnoxious. I wasn't looking to alienate people and be difficult and bitter. I just wanted to have, something that reflected the work that I'd
Yeah,
done. And I
and
didn't
nor
know
and
what
nor
that looked
nor
like.
was you looking to reduce the input and brilliant work of others, right?
Never.
At any
I
stage.
relentlessly mention them. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
and I've taken some flack for like, being a big sort of like narcissist, and I'm really not. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm really not. And I would try whenever I did media to mention the names. I mention them now. Stuart McLean, he was the executive editor. He was the deputy editor at the time. Brilliant guy. He ran Newsnight for a while. Jake Morris, who did all this amazing research that kind of like, was the backbone of this interview. Emily Maitlis, whose name you might have heard before, an incredible presenter. So there was so much here that had happened that I felt there was space for everyone.
Mm.
Everyone could have a slice of the credit pie. And I chased my slice and I chased it relentlessly. And it worked out really well for me. But it came from a position of confidence and wanting my name on this slice of pie,
Yeah.
not for wanting the whole pie for myself.
No, I love all that, Sam. There'll be people listening to this, I'm sure, who are maybe pondering a career change. Maybe it's not even related to their career, just a change in life, right? Maybe some of them feel that they're not getting the credit that they deserve. What advice? What does all this boil down to? What advice would you give to someone who's sort of stuck, if you like, in that position?
Yeah, I think, I do have quite a healthy sense of if it all ended tomorrow, am I happy with what I did today? But you have to have a financial bottom line. Most people in this country don't have a plan B or a trust fund or, a rich partner like paying their bills. It's on us, it's on me.
Mm.
That's how most people in this country are. So for all of my kind of like courage and my relentless pursuit of new things and my fearlessness, I have a financial bottom line, and that financial bottom line is paying the bills, keeping my son alive, keeping us clothed, keeping the heating on. Beyond that, I don't really have financial aspirations. And I think that that has been my greatest gift,
Mm.
that I didn't go on holiday for 6 years. I don't own a car. The paint is chipped. I don't care about those things, but I do care about the satisfaction of doing something that, as we said in the movie, something that matters, something that I feel has impact for me and is a tiny little legacy of happiness and satisfaction and self-respect and integrity. So I think chasing what matters to you and sometimes taking the financial consequences of that is a risk worth taking. But I know I'm in the fortunate position to be able to take that risk because my overheads are quite low. And despite a love of bougie martinis, I really don't have any kind of like, great aspirations to be rich. So I think that's probably my sweet spot. So if you think you want to make a change, if you think it ended tomorrow and you would be regretful and rueful that your last thought would be, damn, I wish I'd left this job that I don't like, that I'm pension chasing and I'm miserable in, then please try and do something about it because I don't want you to have any regrets. Because I tell you, if it all ends today, I've got none.
Superb. Let's just talk briefly about the film. A hell of an experience for you as well, and you were the exec producer of Scoop. You've said watching Billie Piper play you and sort of perform, moments that you'd lived through, made you cry on set. So it was a pretty emotional, as well as exciting, but emotional in a different way, experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because, when I did leave and because of all of look, I'm not saying I'm famous, of course I'm not, but because I was a nobody one day and I'm kind of like a Y-list person the next day going to posh parties and, the mail's writing about me and people are interested. I mean, no one's literally interested in my love life, let's be honest. But, the Sun was interested in my love life. I'd gone from like literally zero to kind of Y-list. And so going back to the BBC, it was the first time I went back. I went back to do one interview with a friend of mine when the book came out. And since then, the next time I go back is with Billie Piper dressed as me, a Netflix crew, and the immense privilege of the incredibly talented people of that team, all of whom were like cheering me on. I just had suddenly, I think that the profoundness of it for me was A, the return to the place where things had been a bit unhappy at the end, let's be honest, with this incredible group of people who were basically being hired off the back of the story that I was wanting to tell, with this incredible actress who's been so kind to me and still is. We're friends. Not that I expected that. She's kind of stuck with me. I'm stuck with her in a good way. And it was just what a moment, you know? You walk away from a job thinking you might end up in penury. Could it be a terrible mistake? Should you have taken that job with Piers Morgan? And now here you are with 130 people on payroll, Billie Piper dressed in your, kind of cheapest chips outfit, strutting, pretending to be you in a blonde wig and huge sunglasses that you used to wear every day at the office and people used to take the mickey out of you for. And wow. I
Love it.
mean, if you're not going to cry at that, you must have a heart of stone.
Well, it's just such a great kind of demonstration, a sort of manifestation of you having taken control.
Yes,
To
it could
see
have gone horribly
that
wrong though,
happening
Andy.
in front of you.
Yeah, of course. It could have gone horribly wrong,
Of
but it
course.
was the most incredible manifestation of how it had gone incredibly right.
Yeah, amazing. Look, I mean, we've talked a lot about Prince Andrew, but there are a tremendous amount of interviews that came before. We touched on some of them in the intro. All of them demonstrations of your abilities to persuade and to build trust. Let me just ask you, what's the sort of operating system that you have for building trust, right? What's the approach that you take to get to that point with someone who is invariably either very well known, either for the right or the wrong reasons, powerful, an ego more often than not. What's the Sam Mcalister model for building trust?
Well, look, I was really well versed in dealing with ego. I worked at the BBC, so I mean, it's fine. I think the model is really. I mean, I hate the word authenticity, but I'm going to have to use it. I think my superpower was that I don't know how to be any different. So it's a combination of personality and preparation. The preparation is when you're dealing with anyone, in the process of trying to persuade someone powerful to take a risk, which is generous of them to do.
Yes.
Understanding that they are doing you a favor. I had no sense of kind of like, oh, how lucky you could be on Newsnight. Are you insane? I mean,
Mm.
what a risk.
Mm.
So understanding it's a risk and coming at it from doing research into the individual as to the concerns they may or may not have, what they might think of the opportunity, what might motivate them to do it in terms of their bottom line, or they're selling a book, irony, or they're putting forward a government proposal. What is the sweet spot between what I offer and the risk on the table and their offering and what they need, what their motivation is? But on top of that, because of the type of person I am, take it or leave it. You like it, you don't like it. Zero, what's given
Yeah.
in a professional setting. But you may not want to work with me, but you won't forget meeting me. And in a sea of people just kind of like, sucking up to people and telling them what they want to hear, I never told people anything other than the truth. And the truth is, doing these kinds of interviews is a risk, and you might mess it up or you might be brilliant. I don't know. But here are 4 reasons why you should do it, in my view. And if you decide not to do it, never taking it personally, not being difficult about it, leaving a good taste in someone's mouth. And I think really the combination of integrity, authenticity, robustness,
Mm.
directness,
Yes.
and being actually pretty easy to work with
Hmm.
made me quite unusual in journalism.
I think if I would try to distill all that down to one word, I'd say respect. I think
Yeah.
you that's how you've built trust with those people that you've worked with, is that you've treated them with respect and you've demanded it of yourself.
Always.
Right.
Look,
And
I'm no
that's
better than
that's
anyone.
how proper relationships are built, right?
Totally. Yeah, I'm no better than anyone, and no one is better than me. And my mum literally taught me to mix with princes and paupers. She didn't mean it literally, of course,
Yeah.
but I've been brought up that I don't care if you're Elon Musk,
Yeah.
and you're worth whatever billion. Like, are you like just talk, just be normal. You're not better than me, and I'm not better than you. So that was a really good foundation for not being intimidated by wealthy, powerful people, and also not caring. I'm not going to get an OBE, a CBE, an MBE. I'm not going to be invited to the palace for parties. And I don't care because I was going to be at home watching Love Island on Netflix anyway, or whatever, having some Pringles or minding my own business on a bus, which I still always travel on. I wasn't looking for those things. I wasn't looking to be part of that club.
Yeah.
And so I'm not looking to annoy it, but I don't have any deference or respect or reverence for people who have power and money. I'll treat them all right as long as they treat me all right, but that's it.
Superb. I also love that line that you just uttered. That you might not want to work with me, but you'll remember me. That's priceless. Now, look, I can't not ask while I've got you. The BBC is where it is today. You explained, right at the start of this interview, just how much you, I think, still, care about that organisation and the people, a lot of the people that work within it. It's in crisis. It's latest in a long line, but this one feels pretty visceral at the moment. Trust sort of sits at the centre, doesn't it, of this current situation for the Beeb. What's its way forward, Sam, in your view?
Yeah, it's an impossible situation. It just feels it gets worse every day. And I am, as you say, still obviously emotionally invested in an incredible corporation that gave me an incredible career. But it just seems every time, a bit like with Prince Andrew, I'm afraid, every time a decision is made, it feels that it often goes the wrong way. And I think one of the things that the BBC does poorly is reflect with humility when things go wrong. So if you are at a stage at which your director general has been, kind of like vilified for the handling of the situation with Hugh Edwards, with Bob Villan, with the situation, in the Middle East, with this spliced, footage in Panorama, it's not just one thing. There were many years of quite profound criticisms. And I think at the stage at which things are imploding, instead of kind of being bitter or people posting kind of, things on X who work there about how it's some right-wing conspiracy. This is the most unhelpful way of progressing because the perception of the BBC as some kind of liberal consensus elite is really compounded by people saying, well, actually, this is a right-wing conspiracy. Our hands are clean. We're perfect. And I think that lack of humility has really disconnected the average person from the BBC, which increasingly feels, even to me, like a place for elite conversations that don't understand the country as a whole. And that is where the space is to improve. If the next Director General or the people around him or her care more about the British in Broadcasting Corporation, I think you can steer the ship the right direction. But if there continues to be this almost slight disdain for the British element, particularly those who disagree with the small kind of like, beautiful, no doubt, world of Islington kind of dinner parties, then it's all over. Game over. So who is the next Director General? I mean, I'm available. And what does he or she do?
I tell you. Campaign starts here.
I'll wait for the call, Andy, but I won't be holding my breath.
Well, like I say, it starts here. Sam, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been absolutely brilliant and useful, I think, and I hope for people listening and watching. You are an absolute powerhouse, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.
Crisis What Crisis is a podcast really that's all about coming back from the brink to a place of strength. So if you know someone who needs that, please do share it. As always, full transcripts along with helpful links are available on our website. Just head to crisiswhatcrisis.com.